edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Antry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered, and happy Thanksgiving to everyone in Canada. That's the reason we're recording on a Tuesday this week instead of Monday, because I was having Thanksgiving dinner. So
Just let you know, when you point at me with your left hand, I can't see it.
You figured it out.
I see your shoulder move. I figure that must be it.
That's it.
That must be my sign.
I'm trying not to hit my microphone. That's where that's coming from.
Yes, we are recording the day after because of Thanksgiving. I forgot. I started getting set up last night, and then I remembered. And then I didn't actually look at the question list, though. And I still have. I tried to do it today. I was in a meeting at the school where a woman apparently believes that in order to be heard off of a PA system, you have to scream into the microphone while at the same time shoving it all the way down your throat, so that it can get into your right next to your vocal cords while you are speaking.
I imagine she yells on the phone too.
Ear piercing. And this is saying something. Within seconds, I had a headache. And then we're also starting late because, that meeting ran a little bit longer than it should have, because she likes to hear herself talk as well. And then I was helping my wife write an angry email to my son's principal because that school is dropping the ball. So,
Gotcha.
Yes, it's been one of those days. So we are going to get right into this. This is AV Rant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. Get your questions answered. All you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. Go to www.avrant.com. Leave us a comment there. Facebook.com/avrantpodcast. YouTube.com/c/avrant. Any of those places. Though, if you leave a comment on YouTube, just expect that we're going to kind of ignore it unless I stumble across it and then go, oh, look, somebody commented.
An actual
and it's
legitimate question.
Not mean. It's not some random person who stumbled across it.
Please don't leave your questions on YouTube. Just question@avrant.com. Please send them by email.
So
that is by far the easiest way for us.
If you want to talk to us directly, it's rob@avrant.com. His Twitter is @FirstReflect. Tom@avrant.com. My Twitter is at @avrant_Tom. Boy, that just went right out of my head for a second. We also have our producer, Austin. He handles our videos and is, I guess, some of the question list, maybe? I'm not really sure.
Yeah, he's back into it.
Good. He's maybe his back is healed from moving the subwoofers.
I'm guessing toes.
Yeah, really. Whew. So he has a Twitter @Austin, TEM Pond. His Twitter is his Twitter. So he also has his own podcast, We Watch Movies podcast about movie posters.
Yep.
Don't see the movies. They just look at the posters.
Try to figure out what the movie's about just from the poster.
Yeah, they actually give the movie a grade.
Yep.
They will rate the movie based on the poster.
That's right.
And it's they don't always look at the same poster, but they'll only look at one because there's more than one host in that podcast.
So they look up the movie, they find a poster. They don't confer to make sure it's the same poster.
No, it's most of the podcast is them arguing about what the poster contains and thinly veiled threats of bodily harm because the other person can't see that it is in fact a female on the cover when the other person insists it is a male. So stuff like that.
Yep.
It's kind of.
We Watch Movies, because We Watch Movie posters was too long, so We Watch Movies.
It did not fit on the line.
That's right.
You got it. We Watch Movie posters didn't fit. They could have just called it movie posters, or We Grade Movie Posters, or We Are a Bunch of Idiots Who Don't Actually Watch Movies, but they decided not to do that. So, before we start the podcast, we want to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, all you have to do is support the podcast in some way. To start off with, first, we want to thank all of our Patreon supporters, our patrons, I guess is what they're called.
Patrons, that's what they go by.
So patreon.com/ is it AV Rant Podcast or just AV Rant? I don't remember what I did.
AV Rant
Podcast.
AV Rant
all
Podcast,
one word.
all one word, AV Rant Podcast.
This is very new for us. We're up to 19 patrons.
Yeah.
And we said that if you told us that you were a patron, we would mention you and Chris mentioned that he supported us. So thank you, Chris. The way Patreon works is, I don't know, I've never done it, but I believe you put in some sort of credit card information or PayPal information, and they will automatically deduct whatever amount you decide to give us as a monthly salary for the podcast. So I believe the lowest number is $1. If there's a way to make it less, I would do that for people, because, you know, I don't know how much you think our advice is worth. I know some people. Well, anyways, if you don't want to do that, I understand. You can also go to www.avrant.com and click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link. This will allow you to donate directly to the podcast through a PayPal donation. PayPal handles all that. You can transfer from your PayPal or put in the credit card number. And we had 2 listeners that did that this week, and that was Donald and Micah. Thank you, Donald, and thank you, Micah.
Yeah, so first of all, thanks to all our patrons, up to 19. That's cool. I didn't know how many we'd get, but I'm very happy to see that. And Donald and Micah, thanks so much for going to avrant.com and clicking on the support AV Rant button there and doing it via PayPal, which you know what, I'm fine with it now. I'm like, hey, if you don't want to give $1 a month, or more, obviously some people are giving more given by the figure there. If you don't want to give $1 a month, you can give a one-time donation via PayPal, so that works too.
Thank you, guys, because that is helping to support the podcast. That will go into pay our hosting fees, and eventually, if we get enough, we'll start buying gear with it, man, and doing reviews. And at that point, we're going to be taking, we will. I think at some points we'll probably take some recommendations, but I think most of the time we're just going to want to get stuff that we can recommend. Well, I mean, not that we want, but I mean, if we want it, you guys want it for sure, because we're totally into this. Speaking of which, there's got to be somebody out there, he hasn't said it yet, but whoever they are out there is like, dude, what happened to the new receiver? It's still in the box. Okay. It is every weekend. My children are all up in my grill about stuff that has to be done. This weekend, 2 of the 3 boys are going with the Boy Scouts on a camping trip. Mm-hmm. I'm going to have Saturday to myself.
Sweet.
I am doing stuff on Saturday. It is happening. That is my goal. I'm going to move my surrounds down and forward a little bit, put the new receiver in. I should probably contact SVS because I want to put some
another
middles.
Pair of prime elevations.
Yeah, I gotta contact them and see if I can get some top middles.
I'm sure
and then get this thing sorted out. I am so ready. For that.
It's going to be cool.
Yes. Can I tell you that I still really hate the Xbox One's inability to bitstream output things in the proper way? Because I was watching Hulu the other day and I realized that it's all coming through in stereo, and because it's coming out in 5.1 or 7.1 or whatever it's coming out as, the signal is it's not using the matrixing to split everything else. If you can't support the podcast financially, there's other ways to support it. You support it by telling somebody is one way people do it. Tell somebody about the podcast, let us know. Or buy something and tell people you bought it because of us. Michael bought a pair of Ascend Acoustic Sierra 2s. This is his 4th purchase from Ascend. He let them know that they were all thanks to us. James bought an SVS PC 2000 sub and posted on Facebook that it was thanks to his go-to podcast for home theater, the Home HT Guys. No, AV Rant. And lastly, Oppo supported the podcast because I asked them for an Oppo, and they said, sure, where do you want us to send it? And I said, send it to Rob. And now Rob has a new UDP 203 Ultra HD Blu-ray player. You are welcome, Rob.
I am very, very happy about that. They tried to deliver it today, but I was out earlier today, so I missed the delivery, and I will have to pick it up tomorrow. And of course, they did not deliver it yesterday because yesterday was Canadian Thanksgiving, and that is a holiday.
That's right. So thank you to Michael, James, and Oppo.
Yeah, Michael, congrats on the Ascend Acoustic Sierra 2s. James, congrats on the PC 2000. And Oppo, if there's anybody from Oppo listening, thank you so much. I hugely appreciate that. I will report on that next week once I have a chance to play with it.
Right. And what I told them, I was like, listen, we've already, and this happened recently, we got something wrong on the podcast because we didn't know that you guys had made a change. So just send us one and we won't get it wrong anymore.
There's convincing.
They're like, I don't care. We got a bajillion of them. I mean, that's what it comes down to. So enjoy that, Rob. That's
Thank
well
you.
deserved. Let's get some stuff here. It's people that are asking and very interested in our interviews that we talked about. RBH has not gotten back to me at all, which is unusual. So I'm
Yeah.
going to try one more. I was trying right before the podcast, but I ran out of time. We'll see. Maybe that won't happen. I would hate if that was the case, but what are you going to do? I can't make him be on the podcast. Surge X.
Yes, I'm in touch with their advertising rep guy. He was away all week last week, so
Okay.
he should be back tomorrow, I think is what
Okay.
his auto email reply said. So we'll find out about Surgex then.
And Brent Butterworth?
Yeah, didn't hear back from James, although that is hugely partially my fault because I sent a reply to James to say, hey, let's get us in touch with Brent Butterworth. And then I checked back because I'm like, haven't heard back from James yet. And there it is sitting in my outbox not having been sent because it, I don't know, lost network connection as soon as I pressed
You
send.
would use Outlook or something? Outlook's the only one I know that does crap like
No,
that.
Gmail still has an outbox, so I don't know what happened there. So part of
That's
that is
weird.
usually my fault. But then over the weekend, didn't hear back from James. So, so all of them still in the works, which means it's good. More time for you to send your questions, please. Question@avrant.com if you have questions for RBH, who make speakers, Surge X, who make power protection. What would you call it? Things, power protection components,
Devices.
and Brent Butterworth, who is the former editor-in-chief of Home Theater Magazine and whose writing can still be seen all over the place, including the Wirecutter and Sound and Vision these days. So send those questions. We'll hold on to them and ask them when we can.
Great. I also want to thank David B. He made some awesome fan art for Austin's podcast, the We Watch Movies podcast, which is pretty cool. I don't know
I
if you
really
can
like that. It looks pro, man.
It does look pro. I'm just wondering if he could really use this, because isn't that like totally a Godzilla thing that he just changed? Because I would, you know what, Austin, I would use it, and then
Yeah, I mean,
ask forgiveness when they say, "Oh, you can't use that." Then
take it down.
it down.
But for anyone who's looking at YouTube, we're showing it there in our video feed. So very cool. They over at We Watch Movies, they do a monster series. I forget what month they do that during. But
how is it not October? But go on.
Yeah, because I heard it not that long ago. So, but whatever it is, they do a whole month where all they do is monster movies. So it's a take on that theme. Very cool.
Speaking
I like
of
that,
monster
David.
movies, I watched a little bit of Cloverfield, the first one, last night. Again, I haven't seen it in a really long time, and I was like, God, this shaky handheld cam crap really gets on your nerves.
Yeah, glad we got over that trend.
Yeah, that's thank God for that. All right, news. Efren, who's our listener in Puerto Rico, we of the ones that we know of, Efren is the one. He has posted on Facebook, and he is in fact alive.
Yes.
So we are very relieved to hear that. So that's exactly the amount of information we got from him. So I know people that are in Puerto Rico right now, and they are like having to go from like drive or travel to a city or a part of a city where they can get cell phone reception, but to get messages out. So I don't expect to hear much from him until they get all the paper towels they're supposed to get over there, or whatever is the most recent thing. So he's alive. So
It was very good to hear from Efren. That's a relief.
that's me clapping. If you're wondering what that sound was, that was me clapping, giving him a round of applause. Okay, so I'm glad he's alive. Also in the news, the Home Theater Geeks podcast was abruptly canceled by the Twit network. Scott Wilkinson posted on AVS forums, where he's still editor-in-chief, that he might resurrect the podcast on a different podcast network or in a new form at some point in the future. Do we put it on the AV Rant network?
Yeah, what a network. One show.
It's a network of one right now. Everyone starts to do it. Anyways, but for now, he's taking a break, and unfortunately, the Home Theater Geeks wasn't given a farewell episode, so the September 28th edition marks the end of the show. So a shout out to Infinite Gary for being the first to alert us about this sad turn of events.
Yeah, I didn't hear about that. Gary emailed me shortly after the podcast last week, and he's like, hey, Home Theater Geeks got canceled. I was like, what? That can't be right. But sure enough, official post from Scott Wilkinson on AVS Forum. So yeah, that's... I really enjoyed that podcast because that was a unique format where all he did was interviews, and you can tell by, scheduling interviews is not easy. To do it every single week and to be as prepared and well-versed in everything as he was, that a huge respect from me for putting out a podcast like that. So very sad to see that canceled, but hoping it comes back sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of a crap move to just dump it like that. There's no way he didn't know it was. He knew it was coming.
Like they.
You know what I'm saying?
Home Theater Geeks didn't have any advertising for a number of weeks prior to this cancellation, where previously they always had. So I don't imagine Scott was 100% surprised by this, but just that, they weren't really able to wrap it up and let their listeners know beforehand, and that's a shame. So
that is a shame. It's a shame for the listeners too. The SNES Classic Edition has already been cracked, so loading illegally downloaded ROMs from the entire SNES catalog of games is relatively easy. SNES Mini can also emulate NES games, so you can sideload both catalogs onto one machine, and if you're inclined for such pirate-like activities, that's shocking no one.
Nope.
Also, TLC has a 75-inch Dolby Vision Roku TV for $2,000. The 75C807 is an edge-lit 75-inch TV.
That's what it is. But
it is like a black hole in the center of that thing. So black levels and contrast aren't quite as good as the P series. That's an understatement, which is only available in the 55-inch model. So if you want the P series, which has the zones and all that, right? It has zones.
Oh yeah, it's got 72 zones in a 55-inch, which is impressive for it's like $700 right now, or $650 some places. I'm like, if you want 55-inch, that's a steal on that TCL P series. But this is the C series, which is edge lit. But the thing is, 75 inches with Dolby Vision for $2,000. That's still kind of significant in my view. So there's that.
It also apparently has some fairly decent forward-facing speakers built in that I would never in my life use.
No, but the point is, if you're just putting this in a living room, and it's not like your main TV, it's just like you want a large TV for a larger space, there's going to be windows, and you're not going to build in a sound system. I'm like, that's, again, for $2,000, pretty compelling.
Yeah. Some comments from our listeners. Tim is the fellow who had the rattling fireplace and the older AV receiver that doesn't pass through in HDR formats. He was hoping the Odyssey Multi-Q XT32 might solve his rattling issue, which would allow him to justify a new receiver purchase. As we discussed, that wasn't going to work. Nope. So that was one of the guys that we told him, no, don't buy something. He closely examined his fireplace and removed any parts he could to try and identify the source of the rattle. Unfortunately, it's coming from something inside the flue that he can't reach or remove. But also, following our advice with the subwoofer decoupled from the floor, the rattling only happens at a couple of frequencies now.
Yeah.
So he decoupled his subwoofer by adding special feet or a grandma pad or blankets or a whole bunch of
folding up a blanket. Yeah.
So right now he thinks that's probably about as good as it's going to get. That's really kind of not that bad. That happens all the time. Windows in particular will usually vibrate at a frequency. So since Multi-Q XT32 wasn't going to solve his problem, he bought an Oppo UDP203 Ultra HD Blu-ray player, and its HDMI input and dual HDMI outputs are working exactly as he had hoped, which is one of the reasons why we asked for one of these, because I think we messed up on this guy's question.
That's right.
He can plug his NVIDIA Shield into the Oppo. The Oppo then passes the video with HDR10 to his display, and the Oppo's audio-only HDMI output sends full lossless audio to his AV receiver. So that's what he wanted it to do.
It's a nice, capable splitter in that sense. So it could be very useful for quite a few people.
Now we know. And knowing is half the battle, said G.I. Joe. All right, it was Canadian Thanksgiving, so Jonathan shared Paul and Storm's Thanksgiving, parens, George Lucas, and parens, song.
Yep.
So we're going to link that up. It's got some swear words in it, so don't listen to it at work. But Canadians, it says here, Canadians don't care about that, so it's okay. I didn't know that you guys were quite the sailor cursing type of dudes that you are, but hey.
Well, go and buy our movie ratings. We don't care about foul language. That's not going to get you an R up here.
Basically, it's like, stop messing with the movies is the whole song.
It's kind of old, so it's kind of funny to go back. But it's also funny because they address the fact that it will get old.
Yeah, they said song. This is going to get old, and if we're wrong about some of the things we say, we're just going to leave it. We're not changing the song.
So I kind of like that. That fits.
All right, Michael. Last week, Michael asked us for some tips and instructions for making a fair comparison between the KEF LS50 and the Santa Sierra 2 speakers that he was auditioning. Now he is mad at us, or more specifically Rob, since Rob is the one who got him interested in the Sierra 2s. He went through all the trouble of worrying, researching, and carefully setting up the speakers. Then after about 15 minutes of listening, he loved the Sierra 2 so much that he boxed up the LS50s, neglected his children, and stayed up late into the wee hours of the morning just listening to the Sierra 2s and making himself dangerously tired for work the next day. And he is an airline pilot. I don't know if that's true, but that would make the story even more Stunning. If we had any empathy or consideration, I have much. He's Canadian. He doesn't care about language. We would have warned him, and we would have saved him a lot of time and war if we simply raved more emphatically about the CR2s like he has in his sleep-deprived state. Dude, seriously, Rob cannot rave more about those stupid speakers. I don't want them. If they offer me a pair, I'll be like, I'm sorry, I cannot have these speakers because Rob has ruined me for these things. In all seriousness, though, he really loves him, and he agrees with Rob's take that there's just a sense of uncanny realism that's difficult to describe / understand. He also didn't notice any super narrow vertical dispersion, and when he quickly measured them, he wasn't seeing a huge drop-off in the graph in different microphone heights, so he's feeling like that worry is a bit unfounded in his case. So... Rob, you're a terrible person. There you go.
Just a thing on that vertical dispersion. If you're sitting a bit farther away, just remember that even if it's only plus or minus 10, the farther away you sit, the wider that actually, or the taller in this case, ends up being by the time it gets to you. So I'm sitting very, very close to my Sierra 2 speakers, which means I got a little window. So that I think could be a large part of that, what's going on there.
So Mark tried one of the Marseille M cables that he asked about last week. Those are the cables that had the chips in them that do things that I thought
video
were
processing chips built into one side.
Stupid things. He says the verdict wasn't very good. The image flickered when he connected it to his Ultra HD Blu-ray player. He managed to get the flickering to stop by turning off deep color, but then he lost the white color gamut, and he couldn't see any apparent difference when watching a regular 1080p Blu-ray, so maybe the gaming edition is more useful for games, but for movies, Mark says no bueno.
Yep.
Yeah, they weren't really made to be plugged into Ultra HD Blu-ray players anyways, but
yeah, that's true, because that's already putting out a pretty pristine and already 4K signal, so not a lot for that cable to do.
That cable's dumb. I
still think the gaming edition might be something. Anti-aliasing on top of your console, and that could be something. So
super dumb. Okay. Justin, not Bieber, on Facebook said his cat really did scratch up his EMP Tech towers. He caught him in the act, but only after he'd already clawed through the fabric grill and put a claw hole in one of the woofers. Dude, kill that cat. He suggested looking for a pair of the old discontinued Pioneer Andrew Jones FS51 towers rather than the current FS52 model. On the FS51, each driver has a separate metal grille cover.
Yeah.
He also said that Tom is right. It's not just the Martin Logan electrostatic speakers. Their Motion series towers with a regular woofer and a folded ribbon tweeter also offer a metal grille, but they're not exactly cheap. And he doesn't have any specific model numbers, but some of the Canton speakers come with metal grilles. But again, those also aren't cheap. That dude hit me up on Facebook and said, what was the thing that your cousin used to keep the cat out of the room? So I posted that, whatever that thing was. Cat Scram.
Cat Scram.
That's it. That's good. It looks like
electronic cat deterrent.
What it looks like when you go to a business or a school or whatever, they have like the little motion sensor.
It does
camera.
look like a motion sensor. Very much.
That's what it looks like. It looks kind of like that.
Yeah.
But they just had it sitting on the floor, like facing the doorways, and he says ever since then the cat has never gone back in.
Yeah, I mean those Martin Logan motion speakers, those are pretty nice. So if you are looking for something with a metal grill, I can get behind that. It's just in who was it who was asking that question? Was that Jim or David? I think it was David. Yeah, that's.
But his budget was pretty low, I thought.
Yeah,
he wanted something cheap.
Weren't looking for expensive. So I mean, the motions aren't crazy high priced because they
not
are
by
like,
Martin Logan standards.
By Martin Logan standards, it's kind of their entry level model, but in actual dollar amount standards, it's still kind of expensive. So yeah, if you can track down some of those older Pioneers, they are still out there some places. Right. So yeah, thank you, Justin. I appreciate that because I didn't know those offhand.
All right, getting into the questions here, Jeremy says he resisted temptation. Last week, he was asking which model of AV receiver or pre-pro he should purchase to replace his Marantz AV7702 Mark II. But there was and I said, that dude's already opened that box. But Rob, whatever. But there was a wrinkle in the form of having found the Denon AVR X6400H at Best Buy for the discounted, weirdly priced $14.99 instead of like
$21.99, which is the going price at Best Buy. Yeah.
So that was a pricing error, but he took advantage of it. So all of our advice was to purchase the X4300H from Denon instead. I'm going to sneeze. And after he did this, he did his own research to confirm his HDMI capabilities. good move. Don't just trust us. We're not all that smart.
That's right.
He agreed. And so the X6400H is being sold for a profit. His AV7702 Mark II is being sold. And he's now just deciding on what to do with his 3 Emotiva amplifiers. The X4300H cannot power all the speakers he wants, which is 7.2.4 by itself. So he's going to have at least one external amplifier no matter what. He's looking forward to simplifying his setup, though. So the question is, which external amplifier should it be? Didn't we say the 5-channel? And then
Yeah, we said keep the 5-channel he has and sell the other 2, both of which were 3-channel amps. That was our advice, but he's got some other thoughts.
He's found that his Emotiva XPA Gen 1 amps actually seem to be worth more on the used market than he was expecting. So he's thinking of selling all 3 of them and purchasing one new amplifier. We talked about the new XPA 11 Gen 3 amplifier that offers 300 watts times 3 plus 80 watts times 8. That seems like a pretty good deal for at $2,000. It would retain his having external amplifiers for all 11 speakers. So should you go ahead with that plan, or should he consider something else? You should keep the 5-channel amplifier.
Yeah, I'm
the
still
other
on
2.
board with that. I mean, that's still my number one plan, is just keep the 5-channel amp you already have and only sell 2.
There's no reason for you to buy that thing. There's just zero.
Yeah, I mean, there's
zero reason.
I really can't see a need to buy an 11-channel amplifier. You've got 9 amps built into the X4300H. I do think it makes sense powering your front 3. His were 4-ohm speakers up front. I think it makes total sense powering your front 3 with an external amp. Why not also power the surrounds at the same time? But the other 6 or 4, I mean,
Whatever it is.
they can absolutely be powered by the X4300H. If you just want to sell all 3, I don't know exactly why, but you just want to, and you want to get a new amplifier, again, I'm not quite sure why, but you just want to, I would point you to the Monoprice Monolith amplifiers, because you don't need XLR inputs anymore anyway.
Right.
You only got RCA pre-outs from the X4300. So the Monoprice Monolith is that. The Monoprice Monolith amps have a lower noise floor than any of Emotiva's amps. It's not a lot, it's like 3 decibels, but hey, still something. So yeah, that's where I would point you, because you could get the 7-channel version, the Monolith 7, for $1,500. So that's $500 less than you were willing to spend, apparently. But I mean, I don't know, why sell one 5-channel amp and buy a new one? I can't quite work that out. But if you really, really want to, I mean, that's what, $1,300 for the 5-channel, the Monolith 5.
You can get that for B stock at for $1,300.
There you go. So, I mean, let's just say I didn't have any receiver or amps. That's the exact combo I'd be buying myself. I'd be getting an X4300H and I'd be getting a Monolith 5, because I'm like, that's perfect for me. Or maybe I will get a Monolith 7 because maybe I want to power a Zone 2 or something.
Yeah.
Right?
You could you could get away with a 3 too. You only need 3 channels.
Oh yeah, you really could. But
you could keep
I kind of
one
like
those,
a 5-channel amp myself.
All right, whatever. Yeah, I say stop overthinking this and just do the thing
Just
we
keep
said.
the 5 you have.
Just keep the 5 you've got
What I would do.
and sell the other 2 and say, honey, I upgraded my home theater and here's some money so we can go out to dinner and you're good to go. I mean, you're going to make money on this deal.
Plus, if you
made
change
money.
everything and it actually does sound different in some way, how would you know what caused the change? Too many variables.
Right. Don. First off, Don says thanks for answering his previous question about his new theater room that's still under construction. It'll be a little bit over 18 feet long, about 15 and a half feet wide with a 10-foot ceiling. He's keeping his Marantz SR7010 receiver as well as his PSB Gold Towers, PSB Center, and PSB Bipole surround speakers, and the subs will be his pair of SBS SB2000 sealed box 2000s, which we said should be fine for his roughly 2,800 foot cubic whatever room.
Cubic foot.
Whatever. I did not get much sleep last night. One of his main concerns has been figuring out exactly where he should position his seats, because we've described how that also determines where his Atmos speakers should go. First, he'll continue to use a 65-inch plasma TV, but he plans to upgrade to a larger flat panel in the not too distant future. So we had suggested placing his primary seats, a pair of recliners, quite close to the front wall where his TV would be mounted, so that they would be in front of the midpoint of his room, which we said is important for acoustics. It's true. And it will also provide him a nice large field of view. While he understands all of that, he's come to the conclusion that he'd simply prefer to sit farther away from the front wall, being that only 7.5 feet or I'm sorry, 7.5 or 8 feet from the front wall just feels too close. So does that make sense? Does it make sense that you want to sit further away from your wall? I don't care. You sit wherever the hell you want.
Yeah, makes sense too. I agree. Sometimes you sit, it's just that thing of you're like, I'm sitting really close to this wall. Like, I know it's giving me the field of view I wanted, but I'm sitting really close to this wall.
Yeah.
I'd feel comfortable being farther away. Totally fair. Makes sense.
So he wants to sit slightly behind the midpoint of his room, which has led him to the current plan of being 10 feet from the front wall. I forgot how long this was. 18 and a half?
18 feet. 18
Yeah,
feet. Just slightly over 18 feet long. So
10 feet from the front wall, leave him 8 feet behind his primary seats, where he likes our idea of positioning his sofa as a second row. So any thoughts on this plan? Your TV's going to look small, but other than that, it's fine.
yeah, I mean, the only thing to be aware of is when you're going to be 10 feet away from your front wall and you're going to wall mount your 65-inch display, that is now going to create a 26.5-degree field of view, which is certainly on the smaller side. You're still above what's considered like the minimum for HDTV, which is a 24-degree field of view.
Dude, barely.
But it's going to look a little bit small. However, he has the plan to upgrade anyway, right?
Right.
Now, in his diagram, he's like maybe an 80 to 85 inch. 80 inches would give you 32 degrees. 85 inches would give you 34 degrees. That's pretty darn nice, particularly for HDTV. I'd still say maybe a little bit small for a cinematic movie experience, but certainly not too bad. However, the problem is finding 80 and 85 inch displays these days
Is not easy.
Yeah,
not for cheap. I mean, unless you're going to spend a whole bunch of money.
Yeah, that selection has really, really shrunk. I would probably, if it were today, point you towards Samsung's MU8000, which is available in an 82-inch size. I don't know why it's 82, but that's what it is. But that's basically one of the only reasonably affordable, still does HDR. So, sorry?
How much is it?
That one, gosh, what was that? I think it was around 4,000, 4,500, somewhere in there.
You could totally. Why isn't he looking at projectors?
Well, that's coming up later.
Oh, is that coming up later? You could tell I haven't read the questions.
But I mean, there's lots of 75 inchers out there.
Right, 75 you could be okay with. This is what I think.
Which would be a 30-degree field of view, which is okay.
Okay, so he's got his 65 right now, right? And
that's right.
This is what I would do. I would have my 65 for now. I would wall mount it if I could, and then I would tell myself I am going to get a projector someday, and then use the hatred of how small that picture is from where you're sitting as motivation for saving up for your new setup, because that's what you're going to really need to do, because you're not going to find 85 or larger.
Yeah, see, last year there were a fair number of 80 and 85 inchers, and now those models have not been replaced with updates. It's making me think they just didn't sell, or they had production problems or something, and they're like, you know what, 75 is about as high as this market really properly sustains.
Which means you might be able to find an older TV, but then you're looking at like you're looking at outdated technology as you buy it. You may not be able to find Dolby. I mean, probably won't find Dolby Vision, or you'll get 4K support, but they might not even have HDMI 2.1 and HDCP 2.2.
Yeah, because like Vizio isn't doing any 80 or 85s anymore. Well, they have one 80-inch in the E series, but that's lower down their lineup. Yeah. Sony doesn't have any replacements in the 80 to 85-inch range. You have to go back to their 850D from a year ago to get one in that size. So yeah, it's the selection there. Just I don't know. Things could change in a year or two. That's also possible, but right now it's not looking too promising for that 80, 85-inch size.
Right. So he says if he used SVS Prime elevation speakers for the Atmos positions instead of in-ceiling speakers, would that compromise the sound quality? He's thinking that the Prime elevation speakers would be much easier to reposition. So if he wanted to, he could move his seating depending on what screen size he ends up with, and he could move the Prime elevation speakers on the side walls to match. But would in-ceiling speakers sound better? He doesn't want any compromise when it comes to sound quality. You love the elevation speakers. Let's just say that.
Yeah, the ability to mount them on the side or front or back wall,
or on the ceiling now. You can mount them on the ceiling now.
Yeah, you could mount them on the ceiling as well. That's true.
If you were really worried about compromising sound quality, I would go for in-ceiling speakers. I think the elevation speakers, I think they're good. Until I get them in this room and say, yes, I have them to my sides, and they sound like the sound's coming from on top of me, I'm going to have a hard time believing they're not a compromise. I think they're a fantastic speaker. I still think they're a compromise based on their placement.
I mean, it's still just a speaker over to your sides, angled toward you. That's
right.
That is all it is. They
That's
built
not
the angle in, but that's all it is. It's nothing more special than that. He's also in a 15.5-foot wide. Is not super wide, but it's not super narrow either.
Yeah.
So those definitely are quite wide apart. I actually kind of like the ceiling mount solution idea, though, because he's got a 10-foot ceiling. So
yeah, he does. You're right.
That's up there. He's got the space that an on-ceiling speaker completely makes sense to me.
So that might be your compromise right there.
Yeah.
Your compromise might be, I want to have the ability to move these speakers. You're going to have wedges that are hanging down from your ceiling.
Or from your side or front walls.
I think that
you could temporarily place them and see how it works.
Yeah, I would. Yeah. If I was him, what I would do is either I would get in-ceiling speakers or I would ceiling mount the prime elevation speakers.
Yeah.
Because if he wants the ability to move them, I still think they should be physically located. You know, I would get the focal bird things.
The focal birds, yeah.
Get those. That's what you need.
That's less expensive, yeah. Although the prime elevations have free two-way shipping, so if you just want to try them, there's really no risk.
Yeah, I would get the focal birds. I would ceiling mount them.
Yeah.
That's what I would do.
I certainly won't disagree with that. I love those things.
So that gives you them being on the ceiling overhead, and you still have the ability to move them or angle them if you get like a articulated mount very easily. I think I recommend SVS all the time. I don't think this is right for you. I don't think they're right for you. So we've recommended monoprice in-ceiling speakers and some other brands that weren't too expensive. Of course, those come from the Outdoor Speaker Depot, which we never recommend their outdoor speakers, but we do recommend their in-ceiling speakers.
Yeah. I like the MK650s in particular, if you want a specific model from them.
Have we changed those recommendations? And what about backer boxes? Still better to have them or not? Technically, the speaker manufacturer should be able to tell you, or should tell you, whether or not backer boxes are recommended. Most of them will tell you that they're looking for a amount of air back there.
That's right.
Whatever. So that's what you're really looking for. And if they come with a backer box or they have plans for a backer box, that's all they're really doing is limiting that air. Some of them will say it's just meant to be an open cavity. Well, that means that they're expecting 8 feet of a normal size cavity. That's what they designed them for. So if you're putting them in a ceiling that has insulation in it, which it probably does, then you're looking at already a compromised placement.
At least you need a back can, yeah. For any in-ceiling speakers where you're going to be going into the attic and there's going to be the insulation above them there, you, by code, most places say you have to have the back can. So the monoprice speakers, the back can is available. The Outdoor Speaker Depot, they do sell a back can, but I don't know if it's a one-size-fits-all, but they do suggest having a 1 cubic foot of air enclosure behind theirs. So that's not too difficult to construct. 1 cubic foot of air, well, I mean, it's a cubic foot, so that's pretty easy to work out. So, either case, I haven't changed my recommendation. If you're looking for lower price in-ceiling speakers, I still recommend the monoprice Caliber and the Outdoor Speaker Depot MK650, and I still prefer to have backer boxes on any in-ceiling or in-wall speaker, so no changes from me.
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same way. He says if, and this is a big if, he ever decided to get a projection set up, he'd still want to have a flat panel mounted on the front wall and then have the projection screen come down on this from the ceiling in front of it. He plans to have his center speaker and equipment on a stand below his flat panel. So depending on how low the projection screen comes down, it might need to clear the front of that stand, which would put the projection screen only about 30 inches from the front wall. About 30 inches from the front wall. That seems kind of close. Although he might.
I mean, the projection screen 2.5 feet out from the front wall because he's trying to clear an equipment stand.
Yeah.
To me, that seems unnecessary. I would have it come down so that the bottom edge of the screen is right on top of your center. So.
I didn't finish the question. Yeah, that's exactly my point here. It's like, yeah, okay, my dude, go whatever. My friend here. Listen, the very first time I had a projection screen set up, I had a full-sized cabinet that you put your TV on top of. So this is a piece of furniture that comes up to your hip about. Then there's a TV on top of that, and the center channel was directly. It seemed like the center channel was inside of it. So the TV was on top of that. That screen dropped down in front of the TV, but did not go all the way to the the stand, and it
Right.
was fine. I mean, you're only sitting 10 feet away, right? So
That's right.
I mean, you're not, his projection screen's probably going to be in the 92 to 100 inch range, I would guess.
That's what I'm going to suggest.
Okay, that's my guess. So, and you're not going to have any problems with that having to come all the way to the ground, or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not going to have any problems. So this is a non-issue.
Yeah. Yeah, I would suggest what I would have is the screens about 1 foot in front of the front wall, because you need some depth for the TV,
Right.
and you don't want it literally brushing against it as it comes
Right, sure,
down.
sure.
So I'd have 1 foot, which means now you're 9 feet, sitting 9 feet away from the projection screen. If you went with a 100-inch screen size, that gives you a 45-degree field of view.
Just
And I'm like,
nice.
there you go, you're done. And that's a very common screen size. You'll be able to find a 100-inch screen.
So, where would the projector need to be mounted, he asks. Since the room is under construction anyway, wiring for future projectors could be pre-run and simply left unused up in the ceiling, or at the very least, he could run conduit.
Yes, conduit. Very
Conduit.
good idea, conduit.
But a location in the ceiling is needed, so where would the projector need to go? Well, this is really determined by the projector that you get. If you have a projector that has a large ability to zoom, then you have lots of options. If you get one that's not, so this is this is my recommendation. You run it wherever the heck you want to run it, and then that's going to determine later on what your projector options will be. What it would be good to do is go look at a couple of projectors that are in your price range, that whatever that price range might be. Okay, this is making a difference. If it's $2,000, it's $1,000, it's $500, whatever. Go to projectorcentral.com, look up the screen size calculator for each one of those projectors, and find a distance, a range of distance between all these different projectors that you're looking at, where they can throw a 100-inch screen size up on the wall.
Yeah.
You're like, find one from BenQ that's in your, find one from JVC, find one from Epson, find one from Optima, or couple, and say, okay, you know what? All of these projectors would work if they're 14 feet away from the wall, from the screen. So go 15 feet back from the front wall, or 3 feet in from the back wall, and you're like, well, you know what? I might as well just put it right on the back wall. It's only 3 feet away. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's real close, and it might limit me slightly, but only slightly. So if it were me, I would just put it right on the back wall. More than likely is where you're going to end up. But
Yeah,
do that
I mean,
do that little calculation first.
If it were me, I'm probably going to be pointing you toward a JVC, an Epson, or a Sony, because those are the ones that do, HDR, 4K resolution. To me, those are the big guns that you're looking for. Those three companies, all of them offer long zoom ranges, 2-to-1 or 2.1-to-1 zoom ranges, and
Right.
all of them line up pretty closely. Which is, if you go with the 100-inch screen size that we recommended,
Okay.
the lens of any of those projectors needs to be anywhere from 10 to 20 feet away from the screen.
Which means round your back wall is just fine.
Yeah, because you've got an 18-foot long room, and this is the lens we're talking
Right.
about.
The projector's going to be, what? Let's say 1.5 feet.
Give it at
in.
least 1.5 feet. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you pretty much put a shelf high up on your back wall, that's going to work for any of these. Even if you went for the 92-inch screen size, went a little bit smaller on the screen size, in that case, the lens needs to be anywhere from 9 to 19 feet away. Now, that's still saying the lens is 19 feet away, which would be beyond the back wall of your room. So
Anyways,
once again,
yeah.
having the projector right on the back wall of your room would be absolutely fine for any of these. So, yeah, lots of latitude there. Should not be an issue. So, in other words, if you want to put it anywhere from directly over your primary seats to the back wall, anywhere
You're
you
good.
want along that span, it's probably going to work.
And if you think about this, think about the size of your home theater. The size of your home theater is right there along the lines of what I would call a fairly large size dedicated home theater for the normal home buyer. Not a lot of people are having rooms that are bigger than 20 feet long,
Yeah.
18 feet long. Okay, not a lot of people have that, which means you're basically going to be in the sweet spot anyways. Anywhere you put it in there is going to be fine because they're building it for you. They're building it for most of you guys out there, honestly. It's just when we get into these real big rooms or real big screens or real small throw distances that we run
Right.
into issues.
Right.
So he's having 2 separate dedicated power circuits installed in his room by his electrician. Anything special he ought to request? Are 2 15-amp circuits enough? Anything special that he can or should be done in order to avoid ground loops?
Well, we know what Ray Coronado would say.
Does he say 4? Did he run 4 or?
Well, even numbers of 20 amp circuits.
Yeah, I was going to say 15 didn't sound right.
Yeah, he always recommends 20 amp circuits and doing it in even numbers, because when you're installing the breaker into your breaker box, putting in a 2 circuit breaker is like the same size and the same cost basically as installing a single circuit breaker. So it doesn't make sense to put in one 20 amp circuit. It makes much more sense to put in 2. So you wanted 2 anyway, make them 20 amp circuits. That's the good advice. Do that. That's it. Avoiding ground loops. Ground loops shouldn't happen if your building is wired correctly.
That's right.
They only happen when someone really cut a corner, and instead of running the ground wire back to the panel where all the other ground wires from your house are also supposed to be run, someone said, I can save some time and money and just wire it to this plumbing pipe over here.
Right.
Or I can attach it to the metal studs in this basement. Right. That's how ground loops happen, is essentially improper ground wiring. So as long as your electrician runs those ground wires back to the panel, and all the other ground wires in your house have also been run back to the panel, no ground loops. That's what should happen there.
Lastly, he asked, do we have any experience with 4seating.com? Are they a good place to buy motorized recliners? And as an aside, how do we keep from falling asleep if the recliners are too comfortable? I fall asleep no matter how comfortable the things are.
I fall asleep in my recliners. Yeah. I don't have any tips for you there, man.
Don't get something comfortable, but then you have to sit on it. Believe me, you do not want that. I haven't dealt with 4seating. Have you dealt with 4seating?
I haven't bought anything from there. I mean, they're fairly popular. They've been around long enough that I don't have any red flags telling me to avoid them. So if they have a model of seat that really floats your boat, I don't have any reason to tell you to stay away.
Do not buy anything you haven't sat in, dude.
True.
There's just, I'm telling you, I've made the mistake myself. I'm like, these are gorgeous. I love the way they look. They look like they're so comfortable. They were built for ginormous, very tall basketball player like people. My head, like the headrest part of it, my head hit it like just the very crown of my head would touch it. And I would basically either have to sit up real straight so I could use it, or I would recline the seat and then it would be so far up that I was underneath it. I'm like, these are the stupidest chairs in the history of stupid chairs. And all because I had leather. Didn't like that. Just funny color that we loved that nobody else was going to like. It was a disaster.
I'll mention one other place, which is an online retailer that I trust, which is htmarket.com. They have their own line of home theater seating, which is nice, inexpensive, but nice designs, motorized and all that. Again, though, same thing. I agree with Tom. Make sure you've had a chance to sit in one before you order a whole whack of them. So
yeah.
Right. He's only getting 2, but
whatever. All right. We talked about him forever. Let's go on. Daniel, this comes from Facebook. Some of Daniel's speaker wires are in the walls and they were pre-installed. So how can he double check to be certain that none of his speakers are wired out of phase? It's a 7.1 setup, so the old THX DVDs don't have test tones for all of those speakers. Well, first of all, you don't just because it's in your ceiling or in your walls or someplace else doesn't mean that you have to wire them that way. You just can switch the wires in the back of the receiver when you're using the test tones, and it will tell you, you can do it that way as well. There's no reason why you just can't switch the wires in the back of the receiver.
Are you saying run your auto setup and it'll give you the error message that one of your speakers is out of phase? Or
yeah, you can do that.
I mean, just if you're only playing one test tone at a time, you can't tell just by ear that it's out of phase.
No. But he's saying okay. So there were the THX DVDs in the test thing did have a phase thing where it would check your phase. So you're like, okay, check the phase of these speakers, check the phase of these speakers, or whatever. If it only does 5.1 and you have a 7.1 setup, just change the wires.
Right, yeah.
that
So you're saying plug in your surround backs
for your surrounds.
to your front left and right.
Or your front left and right, yes. And then check it that way.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
But there's no
but
reason you can't
you have
use
to make sure you keep good track of, this black wire went to this binding post, this red wire went to this binding post. Because the whole point he's saying is like, yeah, the binding posts or whatever he has coming out of his pre-wired walls, they might be labeled black and red, but how do I know for sure all the internal wiring was done correctly and I'm actually wiring black to black and red to red?
You could also just wire them up, and what Rob said at the very beginning there, just wire them all up, and then if you have a newer receiver that can handle all these speakers, it's going to test for phase anyways.
Yeah, if you have your auto room set up. That's going to be one of the parts of it is testing your speakers, whether they're in phase or not. Of course, sometimes you do get an error message, or sometimes you get something saying it's out of phase when it isn't. So it's not 100%. I understand asking this question. There is the THX TuneUp app, but that also tops out at 5.1, so it's not really any more useful than the THX DVDs. Mm-hmm. So what I would recommend is getting one of the Blu-ray setup discs. In particular, I know for 100% certain that the Spears and Munsell HD Benchmark second edition, it for sure has a 7-channel phase check, a polarity check.
Right.
So that definitely has the signal that you need to do this on a disc if you want to pick it up. It's a nice disc to have anyway, just to check all your setup and settings of your display and everything for HD and 3D, but not UHD. That hasn't come out yet.
I know that, it's nice having those discs, but the reality is you use them once and put them away.
Pretty much.
It seems like if he's already got that other disc, just switch the wires.
Just switch the wires.
So much easier.
Keep good track of it.
Yeah, you'll be fine. Bobby. All right, Bobby is still agonizing over some final decisions in this 12-foot by 12-foot theater room, which also has to serve as a guest room with an inflatable mattress sometimes. This is the one where I was like, I think if I remember correctly, he was like, well, I gotta have the space for the bed, blah, 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 blah. Anyways, so and I said, don't worry about that. You can move the recliners and move them back afterwards. I think that's what I sort of said, right?
Yep.
So he's decided he wants 4 recliners, all in one row. He's going to leave just a little over a foot of space behind them. He's got his Klipsch bookshelf speakers up front. He was going to use the Klipsch R14S surround speakers on the side walls with their half-moon shaped bipole tweeters and wall mount design. But with 4 seats, there's only going to be about a foot from the side walls to the outermost seat on each side. So even with their on-wall design, the R14S surrounds would be really close. On top of that, the R14S costs quite a bit more than the R14M bookshelf satellite model, and the R14M are only 1 inch thicker from front to back. So should he stick with the surround plan, or could he save some money by mounting the bookshelves in the 2 rear corners, and which would sound better? Let me see. Wait a second here. He has bought these already, or he's going to buy these?
He's getting something to act as his surround speakers in any case. He's like, he can get the satellite model. It's cheaper. He can put it in the rear corners, and it won't be quite as close to the outermost of his 4 seats going across.
I do not love the idea of going with those surround speakers.
Okay, because we were previously advising that, but a few things have changed in this setup now. So.
Yeah, and the reason why I'm saying that is because they are meant to be firing in with a very wide dispersion, and you're basically going to have them in the back corners, which means they're going to be bouncing directly off of that back wall and back into your head. I think a direct firing speaker would sound perhaps a little bit better.
Yeah, given this specific setup that he's now described, I agree with Tom. I would now change my vote. I would say save the money, get the R14M satellite model instead, mount it where it works well, which, you're right, it would end up basically in the rear corners. That's going to be a foot behind your seats on the sides. Just mount them high enough that you get a clear line of sight from the tweeter to all the seating positions.
You're going to be facing them kind of towards each other. Maybe
facing them pretty much towards each other.
Maybe cheat them in just a tiny bit and put some absorption on that wall right there to catch that first reflection.
On the back wall there.
On the back wall. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There you go. I mean, he wanted to save money, so we're telling him to get the cheaper one. Can't be too mad about that.
Yeah. The subwoofers, he says, this whole time he's been leaning towards dual SVS PB1000s. He wants them, but the money, it is the tight one. And he's trying to convince himself that he can spend less. The dual HSU VTF Mark III combo would save him about $100, but now he's been doing a lot of research on DIY options. He's found some 10-inch drivers that can play down to 22 hertz. Provided you build them in the correct ported box design, they need an external amp. If we can suggest a good one for under $300, he'd be able to hit his desired budget. He knows we'll probably say to just save up for the dual PV1000s, which is an option he's considering, but could we recommend an amp that would work for these DIY subs anyways? Yes, we can. No, you should not buy them. The SB1000s are slightly cheaper, right? Because they're smaller. Is that right?
SB1000s? Nope, same price as the PB1000s. $950 for duals. Shipping's included, but no less expensive. I have no beef with the HSU VTF-1 Mark IIIs.
Yeah.
In this room size, which is small, those will absolutely crush that room. I have no problem with that. You're saving $850 after you include the shipping on dual VTF-1 Mark IIIs. I think that's a very fine choice. But look, he's like, can we just throw out an example of a $300 amp that could drive these DIY subs anyway? Yeah. Parts Express, or Sweetwater or B&H Photo. Just check their pro amp designs. I would probably point you to a Behringer iNuke.
Right, iNuke is the one that everybody kind of goes with. Just make sure it doesn't have a fan, whatever it is. Any amp, basically any amp of any power. You wouldn't have a muff, but the iNukes are like 1,000 watts, aren't they, or something ridiculous like that?
Oh well, but they kind of fudge the numbers because they'll be like, it's 1,000 watts, but that's when it's bridged into 2 ohms.
Right.
So there's some weirdness there, but I mean, honestly, you don't need anything more than 300 watts per channel into 4 ohms because these are going to be 4 ohm drivers.
Right.
Being subwoofer
so it's
drivers.
150 into 8.
I mean, if you went with something that can deliver 500 watts into 4 ohms, that is completely going to cover any DIY you could possibly imagine in this room size.
Yeah.
So I think there's actually like the iNuke 3000, which even though that number seems crazy high into the 4 ohms, it is like 500 watts per channel or something in there. Whatever it was, I think it was the iNuke 3000, which I believe I saw going online for about $230. So it's definitely under your $300 price point. There's no
Dude, you could
question
just
it could drive
go to your local pawn shop, find an old subwoofer, and just plug it in, make sure the amp works, tear the amp out of it. It'll look awful, but who cares?
That's gonna look. These are so inexpensive anyway that
I bet you get it for like $50, dude.
That's true, I suppose.
I mean, at this point, if you're really trying to save money, let's just go all the way. And you're gonna DIY this thing. Don't even put a covering on them. Just make them this raw MDF. Build it out of 2x4s. No, I mean, okay, dude, I understand where you're coming from, and
yes,
I know I'm giving you a hard time, but the reality is I completely understand. I don't know that 10-inch drivers that can play down to 22 hertz, provided you build them into the correct ported box. It is just not that easy.
You got to finish that box too.
Well, they get down to 22 hertz. Are they going to be? Is it going to be flat? Is it going to have frequency response issues all over the place? Is it getting down to 22 hertz, but it's not loud enough for you for the human ear to hear in a reasonable way? You know, if it was just as easy as throwing a driver in the right size box, we could all do it. We would all be doing DIY. There'd be no reason for SVS, the company that you're looking at, to have 25 different driver designs before they settled on the driver for the 2000 series. If it was as easy as putting any old beefy driver in a box and making sure the box has the right internal volume and port sizes, it's just not.
My honest vote for you here is the HSUs. Because they're gonna perform really nicely. You're saving some money, so you can be like, hey, I didn't spend as much as the SVSs were gonna cost. I went the logical route and I saved myself some money, and they're still going to perform really well, and you don't have to finish the cabinets yourself and worry about external amplification or any of that. That's my vote for you.
Okay. I still think you should get the SVSs. And just because that's what
I wouldn't say no, but I'm like, the $100 is $100.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, you know what? Buyer's remorse.
And
I'm gonna put it out there. Buyer's remorse.
Maybe by getting the smaller, less expensive satellite Klipsch's, he'll have saved enough money that he can put them into the HSUs or the SVSs. Yeah. I'm just saying maybe that can happen now.
You do, man. If you do build your subs, we've had a lot of people talk about building their own subs on this podcast. How many pictures of self-built subs have you seen on this podcast, Rob? How many times has somebody sent you a picture of a sub that they have built?
I know of 3 for certain.
Okay.
There's probably more.
All right. This podcast has been going on for 10
One of them was that one
years.
that was an entire stage that the whole thing was a folded horn. Remember?
Oh, right.
That was a 10-inch driver, but the folded horn was so long and huge that it was actually an entire stage. That like the stage.
Dude, who was that guy?
platform
Did he
behind
used
it
to come to
was like
the after
He did
parties?
come to the hangouts, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I remember him. But he built that before. I mean, it wasn't like he didn't ask us about it on the podcast and end up building it.
No.
He had already had that. I'm
He
talking
already
about
had that,
people coming to us asking about building a sub and then afterwards saying, hey, I built it. Here's the sub.
And we had that guy who ended up starting his own company because we were so impressed with the finish job he did on his.
That's
for
true.
sure.
That is true.
I'm trying to. I know there was one other. I can't remember the specifics, but
All right. Let's go on. Patrick recently discovered the show and has been listening to old episodes to catch up. So first, he'd like to say pomegranate. So, a very strange thing to say. I'm not sure what that's about. He's looking for a small speaker or stereo pair for his desk at work. He's been using headphones, but then he can't hear when somebody's talking to him. That's the point of the headphones. He doesn't want it to be distracting to the others around him, though, so he wants something highly directional. He'd prefer Bluetooth if possible. But most Bluetooth speakers seem to aim for a wide dispersion. Do we have any recommendations for narrow dispersion speakers? Budget is about $100. Yes, open back headphones.
yeah.
The answer to your question is open back headphones. What you want is something that lets sound in while also letting sound out. Or giving you the sound you want, but letting the outside sound in. Open back headphones do that. You keep your headphones at a low level. You'll be able to hear people talking to you, no problem, or at least walking into your office and sneaking up behind you, or whatever it is that you're worried about. And that is the solution to your problem. Any directional speaker or speakers that we can recommend to you are not directional enough.
Nope. They're totally going to be audible. I mean, I saw some like Indiegogo things that were exactly this idea. They're like, there's a speaker that you could use in a cubicle that's only aimed at you, and all of the messages on there was, you promised to deliver this thing 2 years ago. I want my money back. That was pretty much all of those Indiegogo campaigns because it hasn't worked out so well. This can be done like Yamaha's digital sound projectors have a target mode where they can use those multiple little drivers to form a beam of narrow sound that really is hard to hear unless you're right in that beam's path. It genuinely works, but you're also looking at digital sound projectors that cost $1,200 and up because it has to be the models that actually have the multiple drivers.
So, and this would be slightly large for an office environment.
It'd be slightly large, and
things are like 4 feet wide.
Way above your budget that you were hoping for. So, I mean, it's an effective but not a realistic solution for what you were thinking. Now, what about those BenQ electrostatic speakers that you tried out? Now, I know they're too expensive.
They're like $500, I thought.
But
yeah, no, they're not that directional. They
They're not that
are
directional,
directional.
okay.
They are directional in that if your head's straight in the middle, you get a certain sound, and as you move out of that middle spot, it changes. But I that's at a friend's house, and every time we go over there, we're using it for music. That's
Right.
for the room.
for the room, yes.
Yes, it's more directional than other speakers, but it still puts sound in the entire room. It's not like a laser beam.
Yeah.
Your answer is open back headphones.
It really is. Yeah, what you're asking for, it's a very nice idea. I completely understand the desire for it, but it doesn't really exist, especially at this price point. It doesn't exist.
Well, open back headphones at this price point aren't exactly flying off the shelves that I
Good
can think of
ones,
right there.
yeah.
Not good. Well, the new RBH ones that are supposed to be coming out, isn't there an open back version of that, or is it just closed? Because those are like 135. Those
it was
are
like
brilliant
135. I mean,
drivers.
there are the Sennheiser HD. I think it's the 559s right now or something
Right.
in there, model number wise. I mean, those are nice sounding headphones, open back. Those would totally do the job, and they're very reasonably priced. So that's sort of probably where I would point you. I'll try to look up those RBHs as we go on.
As we go on. Okay. Yeah, so there is no speaker design that you'll be able to go with. So
Yeah.
what you need to do is just do a little research on your own, and we will recommend things as they come up. But $100 for open back headphones. Now the thing is open back headphones tend to be nicer than normal headphones. You can't make. I'll take that back. They tend not to make open back headphones unless they're better quality, because nobody wants them unless you really care about good sound, and then you're looking for a specific thing. So, yeah, I mean, I actually, dude, I cannot remember the name of those headphones. I reviewed a set of headphones that were like earbuds that didn't go all the way in your ear or something. And the idea was that they would allow this outside sounds in. They were for like jogging and stuff like that. Yeah. And I straight up hated those things. But that's because I want to listen to music. I don't want to listen to everything else. I think I gave them to my friend Teresa. I'll have to ask her if she still uses them. But the way they kind of worked is they had like a headband thing that wrapped around the back of your head, and then they kind of halfway stuck in your ear, and that was the other solution. You could actually just achieve the same thing by wearing earbuds and not putting them all the way in. Just make sure you get the ones with the ear loops,
right?
And doing
so
it that way.
The RBHs, those are all closed back that I could find. I'm still looking up the Sennheisers, but yeah, I have to agree.
$100.
You got to go.
$100 is probably, you're gonna have to probably up your budget.
So the 569s, they're down at $150.
That's not too bad.
That's getting pretty close. Those are a nice speaker with an open back.
Yeah, let's go with that. Carl says Star Trek Discovery is exclusively streaming on CBS All Access in the US of A, but in other countries it's streamed on Netflix. Many people have now noticed that the Netflix version is available in HDR, including Dolby Vision, but the resolution is limited to 1080p. Carl has one of the new Apple TV 4K units, and his display is a JVC X750 projector. While he agrees that the Apple TV 4K's current inability to automatically switch between resolutions, frame rates, and SDR versus HDR is annoying, he does appreciate that it offers many output settings that can be chosen manually. One such option is 1080p HDR. So is that what he should choose when watching Star Trek Discovery on Netflix?
I wouldn't.
Well,
in this case.
Oh, yeah? What would you choose?
4K HDR.
But,
let it do the upscaling.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that because the JVC is garbage at it, or what?
It's not that. It's just I'm a little concerned because this was one of the first projectors that supported HDR, and they actually kind of screwed up the settings a little bit.
Okay.
And I don't know what's going to happen if you put 1080p HDR into that thing. That's not a signal it was expecting.
You think it's going to start smoking? And
I don't think anything that bad, but I'm like...
crackling up there?
Letting the Apple TV scale 1080p to 4K, I'm not worried about that.
Yeah, that shouldn't be a problem.
I don't want it taking SDR content and forcing it to be an HDR signal. That's something I would manually change. But if the signal's coming in 1080p HDR and all the Apple TV is having to do is upscale it to 4K, I'm not worried about that. And we know that signal is compatible with your projector. No ifs, ands, or buts. So I would leave it at that. I'm not worried about the resolution. The HDR is what concerns me. He also did mention in an email just before the podcast, he's like, how come on the CBS All Access version, it's actually only a stereo audio signal? Like it's a Dolby Surround, like the old Dolby Surround, right? Like Dolby Pro Logic. It's that type of signal, but it's actually only 2-channel. That is a CBS All Access thing.
Right.
CBS All Access, like, this is the only place you can get this show, but we don't do surround sound because we're CBS All Access, and that's how awesome we are for your $10 a month. So that's a them thing. The ones coming through Netflix are surround sound. So
I did watch the first, because my friend, like as I said, signed into Hulu over here, and I'm watching it. So I saw that Orville is on there, so I watched the first episode of the Orville the other night, and that's yeah. I see what you're saying. It's
the most
sort of
recent...
it's supposed to be like it's supposed to be like funny Star Trek, but it's not. It's just sort of Star Trek with penis jokes.
It's Star Trek with some Family Guy humor thrown in, which seems really out of place because the rest of the show is actually really good.
I mean, I don't know that maybe it'll hit its stride and it'll find
that's just, I was just going to say the fourth episode, and I know I think the fifth episode is airing tonight, but the fourth episode that I watched, which was actually directed by Jonathan Frakes,
Oh, really?
who was Commander Riker,
Riker.
on Star Trek: The Next Generation. That was, in my opinion, the best episode so far. Like, the cast is starting to gel in
Right.
this fourth episode, so you're starting to get some good chemistry. They toned down on the jokes a little bit. The jokes that were there landed and were funny. So I'm like, maybe this show is starting to hit its stride.
Well, if
so
you watch the
I
first
think it's
couple
worth-
episodes of Next Generation, man, that was
Oh,
some
yeah,
rough
it's clunky as heck.
That is rough. I was like, what is this? Is kind of
Or
garbage.
like one of my
But-
favorite shows ever, which is Parks and Recreation. The entire first season is pretty bad. So it's like, you got to give some shows a chance sometimes. I think
Yeah,
the people
like
making the
Firefly.
Orville are smart and creative enough that they can make this work. So
Not that I'm bitter about Firefly or anything. So anyways, his JVC X750 projector is one of the models that requires manual adjustments to its HDR settings. It also requires the user to manually put it into HDR mode, but since the HDR settings are tied to one of the picture modes, he's only been using that picture mode with the 4K HDR content. Whenever he watches 1080p content, he uses a different picture mode that's been calibrated for that. So which picture mode should you... No, we already said change it to 4K. So
Yeah.
that question is moot.
yeah, if the signal was originally 1080p HDR, let the source device upscale that to 4K and stick with using your 4K HDR picture mode for that.
So JVC's instructions for setting the HDR picture mode also include instructions for what settings should be used for BT 2020 content. What is BT 2020 content? It is Star Trek Discovery BT 2020 content. I don't know.
So BT 2020 or Rec 2020 is the big container of colors that covers a huge portion of all the colors that we can possibly see. And when we're talking about a signal that includes wide color, normally it's in a BT 2020 container. Now, at the moment, we're using only a subset of all the possible colors in there, which is called DCI, which is the Digital Cinema Initiative, DCI P3 color gamut, which is a subset. It's a small, well, not a small, but it's a smaller portion of the total BT 2020 gamut container. So anything that is coming in that says it has wide color, and that's pretty much anything that's in HDR, that should be using the BT 2020 container. You can, of course, only use a subset of the colors within that big container, which is exactly what we're doing. But pretty much if you're watching something that's HDR, it's going to be with BT 2020 color as the container. So if they shot this in HDR, it should be BT 2020 color. That's the settings you should use. They pretty much go hand in hand. I have to say pretty much because I'm sure there's some exceptions out there. If you're watching something on YouTube that was like HDR but graded in Rec 709 color, I'm sure that exists. But by and large, any of the actual TV and movies that were made, if it's HDR, it's also going to be wide color. So that's that.
There you go. All right, we've only got 14 minutes left, so let's see how many we can get
Are
through.
you seriously going to stop that?
Dude,
we started so late.
It's not my fault. I mean, it was 100% my fault. But Mark is enjoying getting to know Romy Q Wizard and his mini DSP 2x4, 2x4, 2x4. Anyways, he's been frequenting the Mini DSP website a lot, as they provide some helpful tutorials for using the device with Room EQ Wizard. He's taken notice of other products that the Mini DSP sells, including their Nano AVR with DRAC Live. So he asks, is DRAC Live a step above Odyssey Multi-Q XC32? I would not say that.
Depends on who you ask.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would not say that. It's I like DRAC. I actually got one of the very early versions of DRAC headphone something I tested a long time ago, and I remember liking it. I can't remember what headphone. I think it was an app I tested basically, and it took the if I'm remembering correctly, it took the earbuds that come with your iPod, like the old ones, and made them sound better. I was like, dude, these guys, they made them sound better. They did a good job. But they've been making lots of advancements since then. I think if I would say it's a comparable program to Odyssey Multi-Q XC32, except it requires a lot more from you, generally speaking.
Yeah, I mean, it does use a better quality microphone. It does require more processing power, so very often the actual number crunching is being done on a computer or on a server, and then being just the final settings are what gets downloaded to the actual device that sits in the signal chain there. For a long time, it was more like you could make more manual adjustments to it, but now that they have the Odyssey Editor app for most of the newer Denon and Marantz receiver models, that sort of equals that side a little bit.
Right.
So is it a step above? I have to say yes, but I wouldn't say it's as, like, there are some really big Dirac fans who are like, Odyssey's terrible. And now I'm like, no, it really isn't.
No, it really isn't.
That's not what happened. I have to say, yes, I think it's a step above, but not as large as you might think. And there's a few little quirks in there, like Dirac doesn't have an equivalent to dynamic EQ, which I think is a really important feature. So,
and this is the other thing too. You're comparing apples and oranges. You're comparing Dirac, which is mostly in these standalone boxes, which you have to export everything or do everything on the computer before you put it in there, to an AVR, which has, they have to calculate in how much processing power they're going to give that AVR, which limits the amount of the amount of things that Odyssey can do. Could Odyssey do everything Dirac does and more?
Right.
I guarantee you it could.
Yep.
100%.
Well, yeah, like when Odyssey Pro was around,
right,
it could do a lot more. It was very similar to what Dirac offers now.
So, and that was years ago. So, it's just, these people are like, oh, well, it's just got so much of this, blah, blah, blah. Well, yeah, dude, okay. It's a different product. So, is it good? Yes, it's good. It is probably the only, Wipeout with the RSC is pretty good too. But
pretty good.
It's probably the one I would go, if I had an option that there was not Odyssey, it's probably the one I would go with.
Oh yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. So the website describes inserting the Nano AVR DL into the signal chain in between the source and your AV receiver. So would you simply leave Odyssey off? What settings would the AV receiver use? So it's HDMI in. It does all the processing and stuff like that.
It does no decoding, though. So the whole point is whatever source you're using, the source has to be sending out 5.1 or 7.1 PCM.
Right.
That
which means
must be what's coming out of your source.
Then that PCM is going to be changed by this and then sent to the AV receiver. The AV receiver would then be put into some sort of don't change it at all mode.
Right, because the Dirac will apply level adjustments for each channel, distance adjustments for each channel, and EQ adjustments for each channel, which is pretty much all the
crossovers.
And also the crossover.
Then that's yes. So then everything else you're just going pure direct or whatever.
Yeah. So yeah, you want your AV receiver basically in direct mode. You don't want Odyssey on. You also don't want any of its base management or distances or levels or anything. You just want to put all of those things at default, put it into direct mode, and it's basically acting as a DAC and an amplifier. That's all your AV receiver is doing anymore. It's taking the PCM signal that's been manipulated by the Nano AVR, but it's still a 7.1 PCM signal, and it's just turning that into analog and then amplifying it. That's all you want your AV receiver to do now.
So you would not want it in pure direct, because pure direct shuts off the picture. But
shuts off the picture.
You would want it in direct mode. You want all your speakers to large, subwoofer set to yes.
Correct.
Okay.
And everything else at its out of the box defaults.
Right. And so what you would do, what you would see on, let's pretend that you had let's say that you have an Atmos setup. So this thing can do like the 7.1 part of it, let's say.
It sure can.
Okay. Yes. So the 7.1 would go into your receiver, right? But it's coming in as PCM, which means that you could set your receiver to basically multi-channel in, because it's going to take that, whatever that is,
multi-channel in.
You're going to have everything else set up, and then plus DTS, whatever it is.
Neural X or the Dolby Surround up mixer.
And then that would take whatever's in there, and then extend it to the height channel. So it would make no changes at the base level, the 7.1 level, and then extend it up to the height channels. What you could not do is get a true Dolby Atmos signal.
Or a DTS X.
That would not be possible.
Not going to work, because the Nano AVR is what's connected to your source, and the Nano AVR has no decoding at all. So you cannot send an Atmos signal into the Nano AVR. It's not going to work.
Yeah. So it's described as wait a second.
Yep.
I did that. Okay. So it's described as an 8-channel device, aka 7.1. So there's only one subwoofer output. Could he still use the Mini DSP 2x4 to calibrate multiple subs along with using the Nano AVR DL somehow? Doesn't that go after the receiver anyways?
So the Mini DSP 2x4, yeah,
Right.
it's attached to your subwoofer output. It's expecting an analog signal.
So I think you're okay there. You just send it out to the
Except that the Dirac Live will also equalize the single subwoofer channel.
Oh, then you got a problem there.
So that's a bit of a challenge. However, it's all manually adjustable, so what you could do is just zero out any equalization that was done by Dirac for the subwoofer
There you
channel.
go. Mm-hmm.
That'll get fed into your AV receiver. That'll get turned into analog. It'll come out the subwoofer pre-out. You feed that into your Mini DSP 2x4 and load your manual EQ settings for your multiple subs into that. So yes, you can do it. It's a little bit of manipulating all the signals in that, but it can be done.
If you do all this, you've got to. There's no way to do it quickly, but you'll have to to do an AB with this. You'll have to live with it with all this stuff on, and then you'll have to do it again with all this on. You have to. If you do that, then I would, yeah. So he asks, would the Nano AVR DL be worthwhile in his setup? What is this receiver? Did he tell us that? He didn't tell us that.
I can't remember. Mark's talked to us plenty of times. I'm sorry, Mark. I can't remember what you were using.
Yeah. Let's pretend he has. Let's pretend he's got Odyssey Multi QXT32.
Right.
Do I think it would be worthwhile? Is that what you said? Worthwhile.
Worthwhile.
Well, I mean, it depends on what you value. I think I'm going to answer yes. And I think that's because I believe you're going to think so. I think that if someone gave me this option, I'd be like, nah, dog, I got this. I'm cool. I'm cool with Odyssey. All that sounds like way too much trouble. That's what it comes down to for me. Now, I think that he's going to find this to be a value, and no amount of us measuring things and showing him that they sound basically exactly the same would ever convince him otherwise. So I'm going to say yes.
I'm going to say no because, one, I don't want you to limit yourself to not being able to use Atmos because this thing exists in your system.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense to me.
You can always take it out, though. It's not like it has to.
You can always take it out, but it's $500-something. So I'm
Dude
like,
wants to spend money. Why we can't stop him?
I'm like, spend $20 on the Odyssey editor app. If what you wanted was to play around with individually manually manipulating the EQ of your speakers, the Odyssey editor app lets you do that with Odyssey without having to give up Atmos and DTS:X and Odyssey dynamic EQ.
Yeah.
So I'm like that.
I 100% agree with you. I already said I
Right.
don't want this, but I think this guy wants it, so I'm going to say
know.
yes. But I think I don't think he has any intention. Maybe he doesn't have any intention of ever going to Atmos, and in which case he's going to be
Maybe.
like, I don't really care
That's
about
Crazy Town Banana Pants, but okay.
that. Nah, it's not Crazy Town. I can understand that too. Lemuel. Lem is moving into a new house, and there's a large 30 by 16 by roughly 13 foot high room with exposed beams on the ceiling that will serve as his theater and music studio. 30 by 16 by roughly 13 feet high, so it's probably vaulted, I'm guessing.
Could be, or maybe there's the beams, so it's uneven.
So he already owns a 5.1 Focal Electra speaker system and an Arkham 7-channel amp. He wants to expand to an Atmos setup, but he figures he can buy a receiver with pre-outs and make use of a mix of his Arkham 7-channel amp from Arkham plus 2 or 4 of the receivers built-in amps to power everything else.
Absolutely.
That makes perfect sense. So he's had a salesperson try to convince him they ought to buy more Focal Electra. Of course he is. Speakers for his Atmos positions so that they perfectly match his existing speakers. Crap. Okay, but that series of speakers puts him in the price range of about $2,000 a pair. Dude, stop talking to
the
that
Focal
guy.
Electras are up there. That's
That seems like overkill for overhead Atmos speakers to him. Does it? But maybe he's underestimating the importance of the overhead speakers. No, sir, you're not. He figures he will mount the Atmos speakers to the beams in the ceilings. What would we recommend? Not spending $2,000 on a pair of Atmos speakers.
I am not in agreement with that salesperson.
We are right back down to recommending the same things that we always recommend, okay? If you want to put them on the side walls because you can't put them on your ceilings, Get the prime elevation speakers. If you want to put them in the ceilings, you can get those cheap mono prices, or you get RBHs, something nice like that. If you want to mount them to your actual ceiling, you could use SVSs, but I think you're better off going with those bird ones,
which are from Focal.
Look at that.
So it is still Focal speakers. It's just much less expensive.
Just send
and easier to mount.
50% of the money that you just didn't spend on those other speakers to us.
Yeah, I say do spend $2,000 per pair. Is just make it $300 per pair that actually goes to the Focal birds, which you can get accessories for less. They're $150 each. So the other $1,700 is a finder's fee.
There you go.
For AV Rant. Times two. times two, remember. So that's $3,400 to us, $600 to accessories.
I only asked
for
for half of that. So, Rob's kind of, Canadians are greedy.
Hey, exchange rate, man.
That is true. He was asking for 3,400 Canadian dollars. That's $7.50 American, I think. So, if the budget restrictions set up for being 9 speakers max, would it be better to have a 7.1.2 or a 5.1.4? Dude, what is the deal with the 0.1? This is you save this amount of money and you don't stick it into a subwoofer, you're no longer allowed to listen to this podcast. Okay?
Yeah, we got you from $2,000 a pair to $300 a pair. You can definitely afford to buy a second sub.
You now have money for a second sub, and you can still send us a big fat donation.
You could get 6 of the Focal birds, because them as surround backs, I am also going to say, will work really nicely. Because the stuff behind you just... It barely matters, but if you just want to have the full 7 speakers, then why not? So, Focal birds, get a second sub. But, okay, just aside, a question. If you had 9 speakers max, better to go 7.1.2 or 5.1.4.
The Atmos guys would probably say 5.1.4.
Yeah.
This room is awfully big, though, and I think you can make a real good case for 7.2.2.
I've really kind of come around on the favoring 5.1.4, though. Because being able to steer the sounds above you, I'm like, it's pretty darn important. So I fall on the side. Now, I mean, previously I did used to say 7.1.2. And the THX guys were kind of on that side. But I'm like, it's being able to steer those overhead sounds. So that's where I am now. I say 5.1.4. I say 5.2.4. That's what I say.
Okay. Byron. This is on Facebook. Byron has 4 SVS subwoofers, 2 at the front of his room, 2 at the back of his room. They have 12-volt trigger input. So rather than trusting the auto-on function, dude, I am going to completely fix this problem in just a second.
Yep.
So rather than trusting the auto-on function, he's run mono 3.5mm cables to each of the 4 subs. He also uses 12-volt trigger to tell his Emotiva power amps to power on and off. His Zen AV receiver has 2 trigger outputs, and the Emotiva has both a trigger output and a trigger input. Mm-hmm. That relays the trigger signal out again, and so this is how he's hooked things up. Trigger 1 from the Denon goes as the amp. Then the Emotiva trigger output goes to a 3.5mm splitter. The 2 outputs from that splitter go to 2 front subs. That is all working perfectly fine, no issues. Trigger 2 from the Denon goes to a 3.5mm splitter. Then the 2 outputs from the splitter go to the 2 subwoofers at the back of the room. When those are connected, the subwoofers hum. And it's all 4 subwoofers that hum. So a little bit of troubleshooting. If he uses the Emotiva trigger output, it doesn't matter which subwoofer he plugs in the splitter that's being fed by the Emotiva output. No hum. But if he plugs in any of the subwoofers directly into the Denon, whether that's trigger 1 or trigger 2, whether there's a splitter or not, then the subs hum. And it's all 4 subs, not just the subs whose triggers are directly plugged into the Denon. So what's the solution? All right, Rob, I want to hear your solution, and it better not be the same one as mine. Go.
Well, I'm pretty sure I know what yours is, so I'm going to do the more complicated solution, which is that I'm going to say he continues to want to use 12-volt triggers, and what you need is another splitter or a 1-in 4-out splitter, because the solution to me seems pretty obvious. Just run the trigger through the Emotiva. So trigger 1 from the Denon goes to your Emotiva.
Right.
The output trigger of the Emotiva goes to, if you can get a 1-in 4-out splitter, there you go. Yeah. You feed the 4 outputs of that 1-in 4-out splitter to your 4 subs, should be no hum. Or if you can only find 1-in 2-outs, then you feed a 1-in 2-out splitter to 2 more 1 in, 2 out splitters, giving you a total of 4 outputs from the 1 trigger output of the Emotiva, and you feed all 4 subs. You never connect a subwoofer trigger directly to the Denon. That's just the end of it. That's what I would do.
I'd be
if you were doing
willing
this.
to bet that he can't do that anyways. All right. Yeah. I feel this dude's problem, okay? Because I am the same way. Nothing will drive me up the wall more than seeing a little red light and not knowing if it's supposed to be red or green, and then wondering whether or not my subwoofer's on. So I'm the same way, dude. I'm the same way. I want to know that my subwoofers are on when they're supposed to be on, and they're off when they're supposed to be off. And then I remember that every single one of these subwoofers has basically a digital amp, which creates almost no wasted power and no wasted heat when they're not doing anything. So I just leave them on all the time. I turn them on, and I never turn them off. I know they're on. Why do I know they're on? Because I turned them on. That's it. Problem solved. Throw your triggers away. Throw these cables away. Stop. Just let them run. And you could go ahead and call me afterwards. If my electricity bill went up to $200. If your electricity bill went up significantly, then we can have a conversation. But I'm telling you, it will not.
Yeah, I just leave my subs on all the time. I put them in the on position. I don't worry about auto. I don't worry about trigger. I don't worry about off. I only worry about on. That is the one setting.
I need one setting on myself.
They are on or they are unplugged.
That's right. Those are the options.
Those are the 2 options. I actually kind of agree with that more. However, the making sure all the triggers are coming out of the Emotiva from the troubleshooting he described ought to work.
Yes.
And he already found these 3.5 millimeter splitters, so I'm assuming at the very least you could find one more. That should do it.
All right. Last question for tonight.
Oh my God, we're gonna have so many left for next week.
That's fine. Jonathan, we'll have a longer podcast next week. Jonathan enjoyed Matt Levine's comments on the forthcoming release of Microsoft mixed reality headsets. Some of these early hands-on reports describe how putting on one of the headsets transforms your room or office into a virtual apartment. In this virtual environment, you could theoretically view just about anything, so naturally what Microsoft came up with for the demo was sitting at a virtual desk so that you could use a mixed reality version of Windows 10 on a virtual screen that's bigger than the actual screen in your cubicle, which... sounds remarkably lame. Matt goes on to comment that the irony of using a virtual environment where anything is possible to sit at a desk and do word processing makes him believe that we really might all be living in a computer-generated simulation like The Matrix. It's just that our simulation was designed by Microsoft, who's absolutely convinced that everybody loves Windows 10, which we do not. I straight up hate it. Anyway, so why stop at one layer? When you're in the virtual apartment staring at your virtual Word document, why not put on a virtual headset to further simulate office desk work? Why not just an endless rabbit hole of virtual headsets within virtual environments, each more boring and mundane than the last? It's like Inception and the Stanley Parable had a baby. That's exactly what this is. I've never played the Stanley Parable, but I thought it was awesome.
The original headset has to do all the processing. Each subsequent virtual headset actually would go down in quality because you're processing each layer, but it's all coming back to one original processor. So by the end of it, you're just looking at like vector line drawings. And you're like, wow,
so
look at the virtual reality.
I didn't actually read the article or watch the video or anything, but It does the headset actually know what's in your environment and you use the stuff that's in your environment? Is that how it's supposed to work?
They're calling it mixed reality, but they don't appear to be the transparent thing,
right?
Like the HoloLens.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming it's like a camera that's capturing what the front of the visor is seeing.
Right.
And then it's drawing things on, so it's showing you what's coming from the camera and then drawing other things on top of what the camera is showing you,
right,
to give you this mixed reality. But they just used it to turn an office into a slightly different looking office, which I agree that's a banal and mundane use of virtual reality. Okay. But I did want to say what I find amusing is that I have the PlayStation VR. My niece and nephew like to play on that, and pretty much the only game they play on it is Job Simulator. That's the only one that they really, really like. So there's something to be said about this, that even given the choice, because I have other games, I have other VR games.
What jobs do they simulate?
They simulate an office worker. They simulate a mechanic, a chef, and a store clerk.
Did you tell them you have a kitchen and that you also have a car? They could feel free.
Well, I mean, it is more humorous than that because it's a very silly game, and it is fun. It's funny that is kind of what we choose to do. Given endless opportunity to do anything in a virtual environment, like, yeah, let's simulate a job.
All right, we'll do one more because that was lame.
Okay.
Mike has an Xbox One S connected to his Denon AVR X2200 AV receiver, which then feeds his Epson 3500 projector, which is a 1080p model. His projector doesn't handle 4K or HDR, but his X2200 does handle Atmos, so he's enjoying a 5.1.2 setup. Mm-hmm. There's a 0.1 missing there, buddy. Guess what? 0.1.
I don't know for sure. I was the one who put that number in, so maybe it is 2. I'm not sure.
We'll see.
Let's not blame Mike yet.
He's noticed some titles available on Vudu that offer Atmos soundtracks, but those Atmos soundtracks are only available with the 4K stream. When he tries to play them, he gets an error message telling him he needs HDCP 2.2. He can switch to the HDX 1080p version of Vudu, and that plays just fine, but he loses that Atmos audio. Yeah. When he plays an Ultra HD Blu-ray, the Xbox One S automatically downscales to 1080p, and he still gets the Atmos soundtrack. He wants the same thing from Vudu. Is there a way to make that happen? Not within the receiver. There isn't. Unfortunately, it needs to happen before the receiver, so you're going to need some sort of scaler.
Yeah, you can make this happen. It's just I'm almost certain you're not going to want to pay for the price to do this because it seems kind of like a bit of a waste. But what you're looking for is called an HD Fury linker. It's $180. So it's kind of pricey, but this is the one. It actually gives you 2 HDMI inputs and 1 HDMI output. But what it can do is take any version of HDCP at its 2 inputs and turn it into any other version of HDCP on its 1 output. So you can take the HDCP 2.2 that's coming from Vudu and turn it into HDCP 1.4 that your projector can understand. Right. And the reason you need the linker is that's the one that also scales the image. So it can take the 4K resolution coming from Vudu and scale it down to 1080p. So that'll let your Vudu streamer say, I'm still connected to a 4K HDR HDCP 2.2 sync device, that being the HD Fury linker. So it's still going to send out the highest quality stream. Then the linker downscales it and takes the HDCP 2.2 down to HDCP 1.4. That gets fed in your AV receiver, which of course can handle a 1080p signal.
Right.
And that then gets fed on to your Epson projector, which is receiving it as 1080p with HDCP 1.4.
I'm going to recommend you just use the Dolby Up mixer. Just take...
Take the HDX Vudu that does not have Atmos audio, but then use the Dolby Surround Up mixer to simulate the overhead effects.
And then just live with that. That's what I'm going to suggest.
Live with that.
Yeah, for $180 makes sense to me.
Right. So I'm saying that there is the solution, but it costs a lot of money. Tom's is easier. The other thing you do is save the $180 and eventually put it towards a new projector that accepts 4K.
There you go.
That is also a solution.
Can we do this Chris question fast?
I really hope so, yeah.
I want to do Dave's question. And I don't want to skip Chris because,
There's also a photo, and that'll clear our photos for this week.
There we go. Chris completed his gaming PC build. He's using an NVIDIA GTX 1080 Ti graphics card connected to
high-end,
to HDMI, connected via HDMI to his Marantz SR7010 AV receiver and Epson 5040 UV projector. His PC can output 4K at 60 Hz, and his Epson can accept the signal, but the Epson still uses the native 1080p resolution panels and wobbles them for pseudo 4K output. Should he set his PC 4K for 1080p output? No, it can accept 4K, right?
But the 5040 UB does have a limitation of it can only accept 4K at up to 30 frames per second.
All right. Well,
and this is a gaming PC.
Yeah, you got to be able to. Yeah.
Where you want the high frame rate.
Yeah, you're going to want 60 hertz.
Yeah, so I would say in this instance, because of the limitations of the 5040 UB, set your PC to output 1080p at 60 hertz because you want the high frame rate. That's more important than this higher resolution coming from the graphics card that's actually going to get downscaled by the Epson and then wobbled, right? So much better to have the higher frame rate.
So he isn't quite sure what the rest of the graphic card's output settings should be. Desktop color depth only has one option, 32-bit, but output color depth can be 8 BPC or 12 BPC.
That's bits per channel.
Right, and I'm guessing the higher one is the better one. Output color format can be RGB, I hate saying this one, YCBCR422 or YCBCR444, and output dynamic range can be limited or full. So what are the correct settings? I'm going to guess. You ready? This is what I would set to see whether or not I could see anything. I would go 12 BPC.
Okay.
I would say... I think the difference between the 444 and the 422 are literally 0. I think that you can get the same thing. So I would go 444, and if that one didn't work, 222 for the YCBCR. And the output dynamic range would always be full. How are that close?
I think I would actually change all of those.
Yay!
The full might be true. So first of all, the 32-bit desktop, that is your RGB, red, green, blue, and the alpha channel, which is the transparent channel, which is what your mouse is actually moving on. So the alpha channel is a transparency channel. So that's how you end up with 8 bits per channel, but 4 channels, one of them being transparent. That's how you end up with 32. So that's what that is. I would set your color output depth at 8 bits because I'm not even sure the 5040 accepts a 12-bit.
Like I said, I'd see if I could see something. If I can't see
it,
you could.
I'm surprised there isn't a 10-bit output option because if there were a 10-bit output option, that's the one I would choose.
All right.
But since you're sending a 1080p signal anyway, I don't know what that 5040 UB is going to do with a 12-bit 1080p signal. I suspect that might not be compatible. So 8 bits per channel is definitely going to work. So I would be sure that that's going to work. The output color format, this is for gaming. So I would leave it at RGB. I'm like, let the computer do its thing and output an RGB signal. Converting it over to the video YCBCR signal, I'd want to do that if it were home theater PC and all I'm doing is watching movies on it. But if you're gaming, I'm like, just leave it at RGB. Now, normally the output dynamic range, if you're watching movies, it should be set to limited, and you should be using YCBCR color output for movies and for videos.
But which one? 4422 or 444?
That's going to depend on what the Epson does with it.
All right.
Because you're going to just have to see, because sometimes it screws up a 444 signal, and sometimes a 444 signal is the only one that looks correct. So that one is just trial and error. But for games, RGB and full on the output dynamic range should be the correct setting. But what you'll want to do is have a look at it. Try both, because what should happen is... full sends out the entire signal range from 0 to 255. You get all of those values, whereas limited takes the values from 0 to 16 and says those are below black. And it takes the values from 235 to 255 and says those are above white. That's correct for video, but it's supposed to be incorrect for RGB games. But if you set it to limited and everything looks way too contrasty and black, then you know that should be on full. Meanwhile, if you put it on full and nothing ever looks truly black, everything kind of looks washed out and too gray, then set it to limited and that'll be correct. Again, it's a little bit of trial and error on those. But I'm guessing that 8-bit RGB full should be the correct settings.
All right. See, whatever. I don't know anything about PCs. Dave says that there are many articles online about the optimum distance one should sit from a television. It seems usually between 30 and 40 degrees horizontal viewing angle, but not much info about how high the television should be mounted relative to your seating position. Some articles say that your eye line should be a third the way up from the bottom of the screen, while the other articles say that the angle from your eye to the eye line to the top of the television should not exceed 15 degrees, lest you experience neck pain. Some articles say how far the television should be off the floor without taking into account how far off the floor you are sitting. Other articles say that it's entirely a matter of personal preference. What are our thoughts? Yeah, okay, so technically, yeah, you don't want the screen to be too high. Okay.
Right. It
But-
can be that there can be an uncomfortably
Yeah,
high screen.
every single
that's
TV
possible.
that's above almost every single one you see on like HGTV that's on a wall is always too high.
Above their fireplace.
It is always so
right up against the
very too
ceiling.
high. So just watch HGTV, and wherever you see them place the TV, don't put it there.
It's too high.
It's too high. Most people, I mean, if you think of it this way, it goes on top of a cabinet. That's kind of about what the right height is. It's basically your eyes are lining up with very close to like a third of the way up or less. It might be all the way at the very bottom, depending on how low your chairs are. But what kind of chairs do you have? Do you have recliners? Because you have recliners, all of a sudden all this stuff changes.
Yeah,
You know
because
what I
now
mean?
your eye line, your resting eye line, is actually at an upward angle.
So it all sort of switches around. And yes, it's personal preference, but it's not really personal preference in that what you want is you want to be able to sit in your chair, look forward, and see your TV. Now that sounds
Right.
dumb, but that's exactly what you're going for. And if you have to look down or look up to see your TV, you will be uncomfortable. Well, what determines that? The size of your chairs, whether or not you're reclined in them, or if you ever recline in them, whether or not they can recline, whether or not you're lying down or sitting up. I mean, there's like all these different things. So
Yeah.
the fact is a couple, there is a kind of general place where you can put it that's pretty comfortable. But if you got a real big room, you're sitting farther away, guess what? It can be higher because it doesn't change that much. As far as the angle isn't as brutal as if you were sitting much closer. It's personal preference, but it's really dictated on your room, your screen size, and your seating.
Yeah, I mean, the having the top edge of the screen be not more than 15 degrees elevation above your eye line, that came from THX, and I tend to agree with that. But it comes with the little wrinkle of where is your resting eye line? Because if you are reclined, it's different than if you're sitting straight up and looking straight ahead. So the key, in my opinion, is figure out where your resting eye line is, and then that becomes the base of your triangle, and you go 15 degrees up from that, and that works out the height of your screen and where the top edge of your screen should be. That's how I do it for myself. I've never had a problem occur that way because it keeps the top edge of the screen within where I can move I might have to move my eyes to see it, but not my head.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to avoid. I'm trying to avoid having to move my head to see the top of the screen. I don't mind so much if I have to move my eyes a little, because there's not a ton of information going on at the top of the screen usually.
For lots of reasons, my screen is a little low right now, but my resting eye line is just under half, I would guess, is where
Just under half.
just
Like
below the
it's
half.
below the halfway
Just
point?
below the halfway point.
below
So
the
it's above a third of the way up, below half. It actually needs to go. My screen needs to go up a little bit. It needs to go up about 4 inches, I think, and I'll be pretty good there. But it's really not that big of a deal. And my screen's extra big for my room, anyways, because I like it that way.
I mean, the really simple advice is I would have your eyes somewhere in the bottom half of the height of the screen.
Yeah, I agree with that. I can get behind that.
Because
Even if it's actually at the bottom of the screen, it's still okay if your screen is small enough and you're not too far away.
because in general, that's gonna, because there's not usually a ton
Not
of
too close
really
to me.
important information at the very top of the screen. So it would be too low if your eyes are at the middle of the screen, or your eyes are even with the top half of the screen somewhere. That's too low. That's just too low. So I would, I mean, the third of the way from the bottom of the screen, that makes a lot of sense to me as well. But I go with the angle. I go with the 15 degrees to the top from my resting eye line, which might be at an angle itself.
Right. All right, that's going to be it for this week. I already scrolled up, so you'll have to tell us. I know Infinite Gary is next week.
Yes. We have Infinite Gary, Michael, and Ryan. Those were the ones that came in by Sunday. And then we also had Jim and Biv write to us on Monday. So we've got those questions, and we will answer them next week.
There we go. If you want to get your question answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. We want to thank our listeners of the week. We've got Donald and Micah who left us donations, and we have our 19 patrons, including Chris, for supporting the podcast financially. Thank you, Donald, Micah, and Chris, plus all our rest of our patrons.
Yeah, Donald, Micah, thanks so much for those PayPal donations. Chris, thanks for being a patron. And for the 18 other people, thank you for being patrons as well. If you'd like to be a patron, Patreon, I'm saying patron too many times.
I know.
Patreon.com/AVRantPodcast. All one word. We're up to 20. Somebody donated while we were recording. We're up to 20. Thank you.
All right. We also want to thank Michael and James for talking us up to Ascend and SVS, respectively.
Michael, James, thanks so much, and congrats on those purchases. We know Michael likes his.
And thank you, Oppo, for supporting the podcast by making Robin the happiest boy in the land.
I am very happy.
Thanksgiving miracle surprise gift of an UDP 203 Ultra HD Blu-ray player.
Yes, if anyone from Oppo is hearing us, thank you very, very much. I really, really appreciate it.
All right. Until next week, for AV Rant, I'm Tom Andrew.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.